Welcome to your connective tissue lecture. I'm going to suggest that you have out, in your handout packet, you have a table of classification of connective tissue. I'm going to write this out here. Classification of that says TRIV. It should say connective tissue handout. Okay, and I'm going to suggest that you have that with you as you go through these notes because it's really going to help us. So why don't you pause the video and find that handout and then come back to the lecture. So your connective tissue is by far the most diverse. Most of you is made of connective tissue. It is throughout your body, and the variability is amazing. And so, that said, connective tissue, of course, is going to be our greatest challenge in this unit. This is our bestest challenge for this unit because it's so diverse. There's so much to learn about it. My handwriting looks terrible. Okay. The function of your connective tissue, obviously, is to connect. It's your glue. It's also your filler, so it fills spaces. Examples of connective tissue down here. So hugely varied. Tendons, ligaments, all connective tissue. So is your fat. So are your bones. So is your cartilage. All these are kinds of connective tissue. Okay, so let's get started. Next slide. Structural components. So what is your connective tissue made of? Remember in epithelial cells, we said that there are cells and there's extracellular matrix, right? So in your connective tissue, you have lots of different kinds of cells. You have bone cells, you have cartilage cells, you have fat cells. You also have lots of different kinds of protein fibers. So if you remember your protein fibers, these are your structural fibers, not globular, but the fibrous proteins. So these are fibrous, right? Remember those? Not the. These are the structural ones, fibrous. And you'll recognize some of these, your elastic fibers, your collagen, right? And your reticular fibers are different kinds of protein fibers. Those are part of your extracellular matrix, okay, your proteins. So you have cells and then you have your ECM, extracellular matrix, and this comprises your protein fibers and what we call the ground substance. So that's your third bullet point, ground substance. And this is a mixture of different kinds of proteins and carbohydrates with salts and water. It's sort of the fluid of your connective tissue. Okay, and so these two things, the protein fibers and the ground substance, are the extracellular matrix. They're not your cells. Okay, next slide. Here's a picture of diagram of what your connective tissue might look like close up. You've got here's some fat cells in here. This would be a blood vessel running through here. Here you've got, these are some protein fibers like collagen and reticular fibers are these little skinny ones. Here's one of your macrophages, so that's part of your immune system, right? Your B cells or your T cells. Fibroblasts, this is another kind of protein structure, so it's a structural component. And then, where are your cells in here? Your cells are like, here's a mesenchymal cell, so this is one of your cells. This is probably a cell too, so all of that looks like that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so functions does not look like it's on your page. Where are we with functions? I don't think you have that, so just hang out here with this structure. You don't have to write anything. Functions of your connective tissue. So you have protection, right? Support and structure. It binds different organs and tissues together. Think of your fat cells. You store fluids, salts, nutrients, carbohydrates, lipids in there. It's also used for transport, and it also contains the cells that are a part of your immune system. We're not going to cover this development of connective tissue. We did see it on that original slide. But we're going to pass up these few slides here. Okay, this is embryonic connective tissue picture. If you want to take a look at that, you're welcome to, but again, we're not going to cover this part. Okay, here we are in classification finally, and so we are at, are we here? Types of, yes, types of connective tissue. So, connective tissue proper, and again, you're not writing anything yet. The three kinds are connective tissue proper, supporting connective tissue, and fluid connective tissue. So, three major parts, and if you look at your classification of connective tissue handout, you'll see them, three of them there. So, we're going to start with number 1. Oh, here's your handout. So, this is the one I'm suggesting that you look at. The three kinds of connective tissue proper. Okay, and we're going to see here, this is real, like this is your adipose fat tissue, this is your elastic tissues, right? So this is what we really think of as connective tissue. Supporting connective tissue, this is your bone and your cartilage, okay? Fluid connective tissue, that's your blood. So this one right here, this is going to be the most diverse and our greatest challenge here, okay? So let's get started with connective tissue proper. Finally, all right. So number 1 in your notes is connective tissue proper. And then it says A components, and number 1 is cell types. All right, so there are 2 different kinds of cells. There are resident cells, so that's number 1, cell type 1. They're stationary. Their job is to maintain and repair your extracellular matrix. They also store materials. That's what's in your notes. The kinds of cells that they are include these things. You have your fat cells, right? You have fixed macrophages, which are part of your immune system. Mesenchymal, so these kinds of names here are part of the reproductive kinds of, where these cells originate. And then the second kind in part 1 are wandering cells. So wandering cells, they move through the spaces, they repair extracellular matrix by moving, and they're active in your immune response. So here's your free macrophages, right? Your leukocytes, which are your white blood cells, your plasma, which are your plasma cells, which include salts and oh, I forget the name right now. I'll have to come back to it. Okay, so 2 types of cells. Next slide. Here is the slide of the 2 types of cells. You can take a moment to look through this. Well, let's see, what are really important? Your adipocytes, those are fat cells, so those are going to store your fats. Macrophages, these phagocytize, so they're the ones that engulf foreign materials, right, to get them out of the cells. Mesenchymal, those are embryonic cells. Mast cells, these are cool because they release histamine and stimulate inflammation, which is supposed to be helpful, although what's happening to me right now during allergy season is that my mast cells are overreacting, right? Plasma cells form antibodies against bacteria and viruses. Your free macrophages, again, are those foreign material engulfers, and your white blood cells are lymphocytes and neutrophils, which attack foreign materials, okay? So these are your cells. That's more than you need to know for the test. Far more, but the detail is interesting. Okay, then we go on to the fiber types. So this is number 2. Fiber types. There are 3 kinds. 3 kinds of protein fibers. So when we say fibers, we're talking about protein fibers. Um, and so the first one is collagen. Collagen is it's long, it's kind of fat, it's stretchy, it's flexible. Oh no, it's resistant to stretching. Sorry, it's not stretchy, but it's flexible. It makes up 25% of all the protein in your body, making it the most abundant protein, in your body. Kind of cool. Okay. Then you also have elastic fibers, which are thin. They stretch, they branch, they rejoin. They are what allows many organs in your body, including your blood vessels, to stretch and relax. It's what gives your face elasticity, right? And then you also have reticular fibers, which are also thin, but they're more mesh-like. So they're meshwork-like. They're found in your organs. They act as packing material it's to fill in spaces in organs that need to be filled in. Okay, reticular fibers. So three kinds of protein fibers: collagen, elastic fibers, and reticular fibers. Okay. Okay, so then we have the last thing under fibers is ground substance. Okay, so we're on the next page now. Ground substance is like the fluid. It's water, it's proteins, carbohydrates, water, salts, right? So this is what gives your connective tissue various textures. So, right, semi-fluid, it can be fat all the way to hard as your bones, right? So depending on how many substances, proteins, carbohydrates, and how much water, and especially how much salt is going to determine the consistency of your ground substance of the connective tissue, and that's determined by the ground substance. Okay, now we'll go on to categories of connective tissue. Okay, so if you go back to, we're at connective tissue proper, and if you look at your handout, there's going to be two categories, two classifications of connective tissue proper: loose and dense. Okay, so loose has more of that ground substance, so we might want to highlight that, more ground substance, okay? And so it's looser, it's more liquidy. Dense has more protein fibers, so it's going to be thicker, harder, tougher. Okay, now we're going to go into more detail about loose connective tissue. So this is a handout. I don't know if you have this handout actually, of overview of loose and dense connective tissue. We're going to go into detail about loose next. Loose. This is your packing material. Okay, loose is your packing material. There are three types of loose connective tissue. Three types of loose. The first one is areolar. Areolar. And this contains, as you see here, fibroblasts, collagen, elastic fibers. It's found, the connective tissue beneath your skin. So it's part of your skin, subcutaneous. So when we talked about epithelial tissue, we said that your epidermis, your skin, is one of your biggest epithelial tissues. So you have the connective tissue underneath that contains all of these fibers and the collagen. That's areolar. Here's a picture of areolar. So right here this is the epithelial tissue, and then down here is your connective tissue. So this is what we're looking at in this picture here. And you can see it's full of all these little fibers. It also is fairly loose, though. It has some space in here, right? You can see your collagen fibers are the big fat ones. Here's your little cells, fibroblasts. Here's your ground substance, lots of liquid, kind of spacey, elastic fibers in here. Probably these little tiny ones. There's reticular fibers also. Okay. The second kind of loose is your fat. It's called adipose connective tissue. The cells themselves, are called adipocytes. Adipocytes. Because they are so full of and carrying your fat, There's very little else in those cells. So if you take a look, and we'll see this in the microscope when we look at them. This is the real picture, and remember over here is where they drew it out. And so here's the nucleus of the fat cells, and all of the functioning organelles of your fat cells are stuffed to the outside of the cell because they're so full of fat in the middle here. So that's what your adipocytes look like. So that's your adipose connective tissue. It's just almost completely fat and very cellular. Reticular connective tissue is the third kind of loose connective tissue. This is found in your bone marrow, so it's right where you make red blood cells. It's found in your lymph nodes, also found in your spleen, and it contains reticular fibers, why it's called reticular connective tissue, and fibroblasts. So you can see it's pretty loose. It has a lot of ground substance, so a lot of just the fluid kinds of, and then here's your leukocytes, and here your white blood cells. But it's not as elastic. It doesn't contain elastic tissues. Yeah. Okay. So those are the three kinds of loose connective tissue. Now we're going to talk about the other side, the dense connective tissue. Dense connective tissue. And there are three kinds of dense, also. Three kinds of dense connective tissue. Dense connective tissue, if you remember, has mostly fibers. And it turns out that that's mostly collagen. And it's packed tightly together. It has not as much ground substance in it. That's what makes it dense, okay? So, so there are three kinds. Dense regular. So regular meaning that the fibers are parallel to the applied force. I don't know if that makes sense. So you have a force, like you're stretching your leg, and the fibers are parallel to that. So this is your tendons and ligaments. Okay, dense regular connective tissue is what is in your, oops, I need the highlighter, tendons and ligaments. Okay, dense regular. Dense, oh, this is a picture of a tendon. So on the left here, this is dense regular connective tissue. So you can see how fluid it sort of looks. Everything is aligned here in your tendon, all of the fibers. Here you can see the nucleus of the cell. These are all of the collagen fibers. Tiny, tiny, tiny amount of ground substance, the fluid part of the connective tissue. Mostly cells in there, then there's nuclei in there, and then your collagen. So actually mostly collagen fibers, and then some cells. Okay, we're going to look at the next, dense irregular. Okay, and this is, they extend in all kinds of directions. Okay, so it's not, there's nothing regular about it. It's not smooth flowing. This is the dense connective tissue that is in the subcutaneous tissue in your skin. It's also in some of your organs. So irregular. That's the second picture from the slide before. So this is irregular. Here you have nuclei. Here's some ground substance, collagen fiber bundles. Right? It's a mess kind of. Okay. And the last kind is you have dense elastic connective tissue. Dense elastic, and this is not very predominant. This is found in your vocal cords, okay, and in your large arteries, large and medium arteries. So they, obviously they're going to be able to stretch. That's the important function of your dense elastic connective tissue. Okay, so that is the end of the connective tissue proper section. So those are the connective tissue proper, all those kinds. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the second kind of connective tissue. After we see a picture of elastic connective tissue, so lots and lots of elastic fibers here, right? Little tiny bit of ground substance. Here's some cells. All right, elastic. Okay, so we finished with connective tissue proper, loose, dense, three kinds of loose, areolar, adipose, and reticular, three kinds of dense, regular, irregular, and elastic. We're going to move on now to supporting connective tissue. Okay, supporting connective tissue, two kinds, cartilage and bone. Cartilage. The cells of your cartilage are called chondrocytes. Chondrocytes. So that's what you write down there. They secrete the extracellular matrix, that's their job, that contain the collagen elastic fibers. So all those fibers, those proteins, those collagens, those are made inside the cells and then expelled into the extracellular matrix. Okay. The extracellular matrix itself is called lacunae. That's this word here. We'll get into this more when we study your cartilage and your bone, which is your skeletal system. So more on this when we study your skeletal system. I'm not going to have you remember this now. I don't even think you have to write it down now. They, of course, provide support. Your cartilage does. They withstand deformation. They cover your bones. Your cartilage covers your bones in places like at your knee joints. It also, so you have different kinds of cartilage for your nose and your ear, which is more flexible. Okay, so I think we're going to talk about three types of cartilage next. Yes. Okay, so hyaline cartilage. So this is number one, types of cartilage, hyaline. It's the most common. It's the most common. It's also the weakest. Okay, so it's found in your skeleton before it hardens. You are made completely of hyaline cartilage to begin with. That's part of the development of your bone requires the presence of hyaline cartilage. And again, we'll talk about that when we study the skeletal system. It's also still at the ends of your bones, so it protects the ends of your bones, like your joints. It's also in your nose, so if you wiggle your nose right now, you're going to feel what hyaline cartilage feels like. Okay, this is what it looks like. Here is one of this. Oops, not that. Let's erase. I wanted this. This is the cells. Here's the extracellular matrix, right? So collagen and elastic fibers. Okay, the second kind is fibrocartilage. Its biggest job is to act as a shock absorber. Okay, so it's found in the discs between your vertebrae. Densely interwoven collagen fibers, so it's very durable. You may want to, yeah, yours doesn't say that, so you want to add that. Collagen fibers, it's durable, it acts as a shock absorber. That's fibrocartilage. Okay, the next. Oh, here's a picture of fibrocartilage. Looks like the ocean because it's dyed blue there. Here's your cells, and this is all the collagen fibers. Okay, the last kind of cartilage is elastic cartilage. And of course, the idea of elastic cartilage is that it contains mostly, let me highlight that, elastic fibers. Okay, so your epiglottis and your ear, so wiggle your ear. This is what elastic cartilage feels like. It bends and then shapes back to its original form, okay? Elastic cartilage. Those are the three kinds of cartilage. So now we're going to move on to the other connective tissue. After we see the picture, there's your ear. These are the cells of your ear. Here's your cells. Oh, again with the highlighter. Here's your cells. Here's all the elastic fibers. That's what your ear looks like beneath the skin. Okay, bone. The other kind of supporting connective tissue is your bone. The cells are called osteocytes. Okay, the extracellular matrix is hard. It's also flexible, though. It has micro flexibility. because of the collagen fibers that are in your extracellular matrix. So there's very little, like minuscule amounts of fluid in the extracellular matrix in your bone. It has tons of bone salts, and that's what makes it hard. So that's what gives it its strength. So you're going to write down salts in that space right there. Okay? So that's bone. Okay, and then we have one more kind of connective tissue. After we look at bone pictures, these are so cool. We will see these in the microscope. They look like tree rings. You had no idea your bones look like this. I think this is the coolest thing ever. And what's amazing is that, like, this is not a cell. This is a grouping of cells that's called what is it called? I think it's the lacuna, okay? Or no, it's called an osteocyte. You have lamellae and you have lacuna, again, when we get to the skeletal system. These big holes in here are blood vessels. So this is called the central canal in here, and this is where the blood vessels come through. The cells are these little, tiny, little dark stripy things in here. So let me see if I can draw some. Like, I don't think I can do it. This right here, this right here, this right here, this, right? These are the cells. Almost all of your bone is made of this extracellular matrix. The cells produce all this stuff, and they secrete the salts and stuff into the extracellular matrix, but your bone is mostly extracellular matrix. Super cool. Okay, the last kind of connective tissue. So that's supporting cartilage and bone. Oh, I'll take that eraser out. Okay. The last kind that we're going to talk about is fluid connective tissue. This will go really quick. There's only 2 more things to write in. This is your blood. Okay. Your blood has the following components. And in your notes it says the matrix is fluid, it's mostly water, and it contains dissolved proteins. Interesting. None of this is in your notes. Okay. So your fluid connective tissue, your blood is made of, so don't write any of this down yet. Plasma, this is your extracellular matrix, ground substance. It also contains protein fibers. Yeah, okay, that's what goes in this space. Matrix is fluid, mostly water with dissolved proteins, equals plasma. That's your plasma. Okay, and then you have 3 kinds of cells. You have red blood cells, which are erythrocytes. You have white blood cells, which are leukocytes. There's lots of different kinds of leukocytes. When we study your blood, we will talk more about those kinds of things. And then platelets are the fragments. That's what I was referring to earlier. Platelets involved in blood clotting. They're really important for blood clotting. And these are just fragments of blood, old blood cells. It's like broken down blood cells. Platelets. Platelets also called in your notes thrombocytes. Okay, so that's a lot. That is all of your connective tissue. And we're going to practice a bunch of this, and then we'll go on to the last 2 types. Okay, have fun with your color plates.